Okay, so I want you to picture a cul-de-sac. Just, 5 houses on a quiet street.
A very weird, quiet street.
Right, exactly. Because inside house number one, the guy is basically having a nervous breakdown because he has 17 clocks on the wall and literally none of them agree.
None of them.
Yeah. And then next door, the neighbor is taking dictation from a literal god who tweets about 1,100 pages of text a week and never sleeps.
This is endless writing.
Endless. Across the street, you have a family that physically vomits if they try to tell a lie. Then you have the rich kid who is hiring people to bully him just to feel something. And finally, the quiet one at the end of the block who just got back from a boat trip and is currently hiding a monster in the basement.
And the absolute worst part about all of this, they are all about to set the entire neighborhood on fire.
Exactly. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking the Five Flags Confederation. Now, on the surface, the sources we've pulled for you today, government reports, a civil service exam, a Navy pamphlet, they look like, I don't know, dry world building or travel guides.
Right, they read very formally.
Very formally. But our mission today is to show you that we aren't just looking at a stable map. We're looking at a crime scene right before the crime actually happens.
It's such a fascinating stack of documents because individually they paint these completely distinct pictures of civilization. You have the Amethyst Authority, the Cardinal Conclave, the Jade Juris, the Saffron Sovereignty, and the Cobalt Court.
Yeah.
But when you overlay them, which is, of course, what we love to do here, you start to see this massive interconnected web of tension.
Yeah, it really is.
These are 5 distinct flavors of reality, and they are all hurtling toward the exact same cliff edge.
It really is a domino setup. So let's start with the anxious neighbor, the Amethyst Authority. I have to be honest, reading their Civil Guide to Temporal Etiquette, I felt my own blood pressure rising.
It is not a relaxing read.
Not at all. This is a society entirely obsessed with time, but not in a, trains run on schedule kind of way. It's much more, it's pathological.
Obsessed is putting it mildly. The core insight here is that for the authority, time isn't just a measurement. It's a resource that is actively degrading. So you walk into a building and it doesn't just have a clock. It has 17 timepieces on the wall. And the source explicitly notes that they do not agree.
Which would drive me insane. I mean, if I look at my phone and my microwave and they are 2 minutes apart, I get annoyed. But the guide says the locals find this discrepancy restful. How is a wall of disagreeing clocks restful?
Because it validates their anxiety.
Oh.
Think about it. If the clocks disagree, it proves that time is fluid, it's personal, maybe even manageable. If they all ticked in perfect unison, it would imply this relentless, unstoppable countdown. It's a psychological defense mechanism. They are so terrified of the future that they fracture the present just to make it bearable.
That actually makes sense in a really twisted way. Like if the clocks are wrong, maybe the end of the world is wrong too. And that anxiety, it bleeds into their social lives too. I was really struck by the fast watch tradition. It's described as a romantic gesture.
It's basically their version of a dozen roses, but with a lot more existential dread attached to it.
Right.
If you love someone in the authority, you gift them a watch that runs fast. So technically, you are gifting them more time than actually exists in the day. You're essentially saying, I want you to have an extra hour, even if it's a lie.
That is surprisingly sweet and incredibly sad at the same time. But it's not just quirky clock shops and romance. We really need to talk about the tracers. When I first read about research boards covered in purple string, I usually think, conspiracy theorists in a basement.
A classic crazy wall.
Exactly, the crazy wall. But here, that's an actual government job description.
And that brings us to Oswin Prail, who is our primary source for this section. He's a tracer. And he makes a very important distinction that I think is the key to understanding this entire culture. He says, a board with purple string isn't chaos, it's a 3D argument about history. They are tracking artifacts and timelines because they genuinely believe the past is changing behind them.
Wait, the past is changing?
According to Oswin, yes. He tracks what they call drift. He claims that historical events in the textbooks are shifting slightly, details are blurring. That's why they need the string to keep track of what reality used to be versus what it is today.
But Oswin sounds really frustrated in his notes. He's clashing with the academy. And this felt like a classic street smarts versus book smarts conflict, but, with magic.
It is, but the stakes are significantly higher. The academy is the official licensed body of time magic police. They value paperwork, theory, stability. They want to regulate the flow of time. Then you have the unseen.
Right, the illegal ones.
Yes, these are natural clairvoyants, people who just see the future without doing the math. And the Academy absolutely hates them.
Because they can't control them.
Exactly. It is highly illegal to be an unlicensed seer. There's this incredibly telling anecdote Oswin shares about a natural seer who took the official exam. He failed the theory part completely, got a 0 on the written test.
Just bombed it.
Bombed it. Then he went home, predicted the future perfectly 3 times in a single month, and just shrugged it off. To the Academy, that man is a criminal because he bypassed the bureaucracy of reality.
So you have this rigid system actively ignoring the people who actually have the talent. And that's dangerous because Oswin, our guy with the purple string, he is worried. He's been tracking something he calls the deep chain. He thinks these artifacts aren't just old junk. He thinks they are a mechanism.
A mechanism that is currently breaking. This is the first major breadcrumb for you, the listener, to hold on to. Oswin's board is pointing to a specific geographical location, the Drake Spines.
The mountains.
Right, that mountain range on their border. He says there was an anomaly there. Time is physically breaking down. And the official registry, they're completely ignoring it because it just doesn't fit their paperwork.
Okay, so we have time breaking down in the mountains. Keep the Drake Spines in mind, because that brings us to neighbor number 2, the Cardinal Conclave. And if the authority is anxious, these guys are, well, they're just exhausted.
Exhausted and completely overwhelmed. The Conclave is a theocracy run by a god named Vorath. And usually, in these kinds of settings, the god is distant or silent, right? The mysterious silent watcher.
Yeah, totally.
The problem with Vorath is that he never shuts up.
I laughed out loud at the visual of the scroll rooms. You have these magical quills suspended over paper, just writing nonstop. 1,100 pages of divine text a week. That is a ridiculous amount of reading.
Imagine the bureaucracy needed just to handle that data stream. You have compilers whose entire job is to summarize the god's tweets, basically. They have to sift through it all just to find the actual commandments. And the source notes that about 60% of it is what they call Tier 4 ambient.
Tier 4 ambient, which is just the god complaining about the color of the priest's vestments or thinking out loud. Like, the crimson is running a bit orange this year. It's like a divine stream of consciousness.
It really humanizes the deity, doesn't it? It makes him sound like a micromanaging boss. But here is where the tone of the source shifts dramatically. The compiler mentions that 3 years ago, the volume dropped. The ambient noise, the complaints about the curtains and the weather, it all just stopped.
Just total silence on the trivial stuff.
The god went quiet. And the only thing he's talking about now is one single thing, westward expansion.
Into the Drake Spines, the exact same mountains where the clocks are breaking.
Exactly. The compilers are seeing massive red flags. The Crimson Lancers, which is their army, are sitting on the border ready to march. The church leadership thinks this is a holy mandate. Go west, ordained by God. But there's a quiet 40% of the scholars who are terrified.
Because they think something is wrong with the god.
They think the god isn't focused, they think he's distracted, or worse, that something else has entirely grabbed the wheel.
That is a chilling thought. If the god goes silent and only gives military orders, is it still the god? Or is it a glitch in the system?
And that's the exact question the compilers are afraid to ask out loud. And think about the geography here. You have the Amethyst Authority seeing time literally break down in the mountains. And you have the Cardinal Conclave launching a holy crusade into those exact same mountains. That is a recipe for an absolute disaster.
It's a total collision course.
Yeah.
And that's just the northern border. If you look southwest on the map, you find the Jade Juris. And this is a totally different vibe. If the Conclave is all about faith, the Juris is aggressive paperwork.
Extreme weaponized paperwork.
Yeah?
This is a meritocracy on steroids. In the Juris, you don't inherit power and you don't get elected. You pass a test.
Period.
If you want to be a cook, you take a test. If you want to be an emperor, you take a much, much harder test.
It sounds super efficient, but also incredibly cold. They've essentially replaced prophecy with data.
They call it the long consideration. They don't guess what will happen in 100 years. They run the actuary tables. They have 400 years of spreadsheets regarding crop yields, population density, weather patterns. The source claims their century-long predictions are accurate to within 15%.
Which is wildly impressive, but it leaves zero room for surprise. But the most fascinating and frankly kind of terrifying part of this culture is the truth-bound. This isn't a choice. It's a biological or maybe magical condition for a minority of their population. They physically cannot lie.
And it's described so viscerally in the source. Did you catch that description?
Yeah, the swallowing thing.
Right. If they even try to say something untrue, it feels like swallowing something wrong. It actually induces physical nausea.
Which creates these bizarre social quirks. The guide mentions that truth-bound people are very quiet at dinner parties.
Right, because if you ask them, hey, do you like my hat, and they hate it, they can't just be polite. They have to either roast you mercilessly or sit there in stone-cold silence.
I feel like I would be terrified to date a truth-bound person. Like, do I look tired? Yes, extremely.
Exactly. But in a legal system, that trait is an absolute superpower. It removes all ambiguity. And that brings us to Justice Yao Fengli. She sits on the Supreme Court, she is truth-bound, and she is currently the only thing standing between the rule of law and the Cobalt Court.
We'll get to the Cobalt Court in just a second, but I loved the detail about her ruling. The Cobalt Court tried to pull some sneaky legal maneuvering, and she wrote a 43-page takedown calling their argument a deliberate service of an impression known to be inaccurate.
Which is truth-bound for you are lying, I know you are lying, and I am putting it in the permanent record.
So the jurist is essentially the adult in the room. They see everything coming because they have the data. But the tragedy of the jurist is that being right doesn't mean you actually have the power to stop it.
Precisely. They are watching all their neighbors go crazy, and they can't legislate sanity. They have the data that says a massive war is coming. But the conclave doesn't care about data, they care about divine text messages. And the authority doesn't care about data, they care about purple string.
Speaking of neighbors who definitely don't care about data, let's talk about the saffron sovereignty. This might be my favorite source just for the sheer absurdity of it. If the jurist is the adult, the sovereignty is the rich teenager having an existential crisis.
It's the economy of misfortune. That's the key phrase here. This is a nation so wealthy, so militarily secure, and so successful that they have solved all real problems. And human beings are not designed for that. When you remove struggle, you have to manufacture it.
So they have complication brokers. You can pay money to have a doomed love affair. Or, and this is my absolute favorite detail in the whole packet, you can literally rent a rival.
It's brilliant, isn't it? You can hire someone to show up at parties and make fun of you, just so your life feels like it has a narrative arc. It's like they're trying to turn their lives into a novel because the reality is just too boring.
And the perfume, saffron melancholy. The source says it smells like distance and late afternoons. Wearing it signals to everyone around you that you have had enough pleasure to be sad about it. It is the ultimate humble brag.
It's performative sadness. But underneath the perfume and the fake rivals, there is a very real danger. Because they don't just treat their own lives as stories, they treat geopolitics as a story. The source mentions the arena.
Right. And in most cultures, an arena is for combat. Here, it's for literary criticism.
The fighters are judged on narrative coherence and moral evolution, not just who wins the fight. It tells you how detached from reality they are. They treat violence as a plot point. If a war isn't poetic enough, they lose interest.
And then you have Queen Amara Marigold. She is competent, beloved, and desperately bored. She has tried everything disguises, bad trade deals, and her advisors keep fixing it for her. She wants a real problem.
And that is the most dangerous thing on this entire map. A bored monarch with a massive budget and a powerful army is a geopolitical time bomb. She might start a war not for territory, not for resources, but just to feel something.
Or she might jump into one that's already starting. Because while the sovereignty is manufacturing fake problems, the Cobalt Court has stumbled into a very real nightmare.
The Cobalt Court, this is the maritime power. Stiff upper lip, tea at 4 p.m. sharp. They seem so put together they have an Office of External Perception, which is really just a fancy name for PR.
But the PR is working overtime. The source is written by an attaché who is trying very, very hard to convince us that everything is totally fine. But if you read between the lines, or frankly just read the lines he tells you not to read, it's a horror story.
It all centers on the cerulean margin. This exploration ship went to the unknown eastern horizon. It came back eventually, but 23 people were lost, and the log is classified.
And since that ship came back, the eastern harbor of the capital has been quarantined for nearly 3 years.
3 years. And the PR guy keeps insisting it's just a precautionary health measure.
A 3-year health measure where the queen herself is overseeing the protocols. I don't buy it for a second. You don't send the monarch to check on the flu.
No, you don't. They brought something back, something from the edge of the world, and they are terrified of it. And this connects back to the Jade jurist perfectly. Remember Justice Fengli?
The truth-bound judge.
Yes. The Cobalt Court is fighting the Jade jurist's Supreme Court right now because they cannot risk a truth-bound judge demanding to see what is actually in that harbor. If the Supreme Court asserts jurisdiction, the Cobalt Court has to open the gates. And whatever is in the Eastern Harbor, they think it's worse than a constitutional crisis.
So let's step back and look at the whole map again, because when you stack these five sources together, it's not just five weird cultures, it's a domino setup.
Right. Let's trace the chain reaction here.
Hmm.
First, in the north, you have the Cardinal Conclave. Their god has gone completely silent and pointed them straight at the mountains. They are marching in Army West.
And in those exact same mountains, the Amethyst Authority's researchers are screaming that time is breaking down, the deep chain is snapping. So you have a holy war marching directly into a temporal anomaly.
Meanwhile, to the south, the Saffron Sovereignty is bored out of its mind and desperately looking for a fight. If a war starts in the north, Queen Amara is going to jump in just for the entertainment value. She sees a plot twist, and she wants a starring role.
And over on the coast, the Cobalt Court is hiding an eldritch horror in their basement and trying to dismantle the international legal system, the Jade Jurist, just to keep it secret.
And the Jade Jurists, they are the real tragic figure here. They have the data. Their long consideration probably predicts exactly how all of this falls apart. But they are completely paralyzed by their own bureaucracy and the fact that their neighbors have just stopped playing by logical rules.
It feels like the Five Flags aren't a confederation. They're a pressure cooker. And what really stuck with me is the source from the Amethyst Authority, Oswin. He mentions that the deep chain wasn't built by the Authority. It was built by something before the current age.
That is the truly chilling part. If the Conclave marches into those mountains, and if the Cobalt Court loses control of whatever is in that harbor, are we looking at a war between nations? Or are we looking at the mechanism of reality itself breaking down?
It's like all five of them are pulling on a different loose thread of the universe. Time, truth, divinity, narrative, and the unknown.
And the thread is unraveling fast. And what strikes me most is that none of them are actually talking to each other. The Conclave isn't asking the Authority, hey, why are you so worried about the mountains? The Cobalt Court isn't asking the jurists for help with the monster. They're all entirely isolated in their own little bubbles of reality.
So, what is the big takeaway here? Why should you, the listener, care about five imaginary nations on the brink? I think it's because, despite all the magic and the monsters, these problems feel incredibly modern.
Absolutely. These sources act as mirrors. They show us exactly how institutions fail, how they get distracted by bureaucracy or boredom or sheer fear. The Conclave is so busy compiling 1,100 pages of text that they might be marching straight into a trap. The Authority is so busy licensing its wizards that they are actively ignoring the guy with the purple string who actually knows what's happening.
It's a massive lesson in cognitive dissonance. The Cobalt Court is the perfect example of, if we don't acknowledge the problem, maybe it will just go away, but the monster is still in the harbor.
And the Saffron Sovereignty is a blaring warning about decadence. If you have to rent a rival to make your life interesting, you have completely lost the plot. It's a call to find meaning in something real, rather than just manufacturing drama.
It's also a crucial lesson in listening to the outliers. In every single one of these nations, there is someone pointing directly at the problem and being completely ignored. The unseen in the Authority, the quiet 40% in the Conclave, Justice Fengley in the Juris.
The people who see the train coming are usually the ones not invited to the meeting.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. A little nugget from the Amethyst Authority source that genuinely kept me up last night. Oswin Crail, our tracer, mentions that his water clock, which is a 600-year-old antique, keeps perfect time.
Which, in the Authority, is supposed to be impossible. Their time is constantly fluctuating.
Right. But this one clock doesn't fluctuate. It is perfectly steady while the world shakes around it. And he says he's taking it with him to the mountains.
He thinks the artifacts are keys.
Exactly. If the artifacts are keys and the Conclave is marching to the door and the Cobalt Court has brought something back that might be knocking from the other side...
Who is going to turn the key first?
That is the real question. Watch the purple string, everyone. And always read the footnotes. Thanks for diving in with us.
Safe travels.